behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I'd like to thank all police officers for their essential work and salute their courage and dedication. Let's be grateful and make every effort to rebuild and improve trust between police and Canadians. I therefore invite everyone to meet their local police officers, whether from municipal or Indigenous police forces, the Sûreté du Québec, or the RCMP, to exchange ideas and build bridges. Thank you and happy National Police Week. The Honourable Member for Sackville-Preston, Chesapeake. Mr. Speaker, to continue investing in Canadians, we need a strong economy. In Canada, we've seen the inflation rate drop to 3%. We've obtained the lowest AAA credit rating, the lowest unemployment rate. The International Monetary Fund and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development believe that Canada will have the strongest economic growth in the G7. Furthermore, I am very proud of our government because we have moved forward on programs like those I will share. A new program for people with disabilities, new dental care program, new medical insurance program, new national school food program, new youth apprenticeship and support program, and finally, new Canada pension plan. Mr. Speaker, that's why Canada is the best country in the world.
The Honourable Member from New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, every year Canadians pay more for less because of this Liberal government's inflationary deficits and bone-crushing taxes. The Liberal carbon tax is devastating pensioners, working families, and small businesses. Today in New Brunswick, we pay over 62 cents more per litre for gasoline than families do in the neighbouring state of Maine. Wow. That price difference is all due to Canadian taxes. Next year, because of the Liberal carbon tax, the New Brunswick-Maine price difference will be almost 70 cents per litre. And the Liberals plan to add an additional 50 cents per litre by 2030. This will cost Canadians thousands of dollars more each year. Families are forced to pay more to live in Canada by an uncaring and ideological Prime Minister. And just like his carbon tax, the Liberals are not worth the cost. It's time for a carbon tax election. Let's go to the people. Let's hear from the people. Let's get rid of these Liberals.
Well said, man. Well said. Let's call for an election.
Before we move on to the Honourable Member from Labrador, the Chair has been pretty loose with the clock today. I would like us to make sure that members do keep to their 60 seconds. The Honourable Member of Labrador.
No, give him another 60
Speaker,
seconds.
I'm pleased to stand in the House today to acknowledge six-time gold medalist and three-time bronze medalist Brooklyn Wolfrey, who is a remarkable athletic champion of Labrador. Brooklyn is a 15-year-old athlete from Rigolet in the Nunavut territory. She competed in the World Dwarf Games in 2017, where she won 2 gold medals for swimming and hockey. This summer, she attended the World Dwarf Games, this time in Cologne, Germany, competing in badminton, soccer, running, table tennis, basketball, and swimming. Wow. She won 4 gold medals and 3 bronze for Canada, as well as the hearts of Labradorians and Canadians and those around the world. She was one of 500 athletes from over 20 countries who competed at the World Dwarf Games.
About her 60
Brooklyn
seconds.
was a bright light in the competition. She's a tremendous athlete, a remarkable young person, and a role model for all around her. Congratulations.
The Honourable Member from Windsor-Tecumseh.
Mr. Speaker, the name Marina Clemens is synonymous with Drouillard Road and the community of Fort City. It is where Marina founded Drouillard Place and dedicated her life to building a community that looks after its neighbours and the most vulnerable. A fierce advocate for affordable housing, a champion for our community's homeless. When we celebrated the 145-unit Meadowbrook project, the first housing project built in our community in 30 years, her response was to the point, now let's build more. Her son Jason said his mother lived her faith and always put people first, and she never asked what was in it for her. Marina Clemens passed away this week, Mr. Speaker, and Windsor lost a great, great leader. But if we ever need to find our way, all we need to do is head to Fort City. There we'll find her street, her Droulard Road, renamed Marina Clemens Way. It is the way of service above self. Thank you.
The honourable member from King Vaughan.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal government is just not worth the cost.
That's right.
Since they took office, Canadians are seeing record numbers of food bank usage, with nearly 60% of Canadians eating foods that have expired or spoiled. This Prime Minister, backed by his NDP coalition, has decided to increase the carbon tax by 23%. This is disgusting. Unlike this Prime Minister, most Canadians don't have a trust fund, and so this increase has not only driven more people to food banks, but it also hampering donations. With fewer donations and higher demand, food banks are being forced to close their doors. Seniors who were hoping to see some relief from the recent budget are finding themselves waiting in long lineups at food banks just to make ends meet. Common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime, so Canadians have the dignity to eat healthy and safe food.
The honourable member from Humber River, Black Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in the House today to acknowledge a dedicated constituent and entrepreneur, Jerry Fishman. Jerry is celebrating his 95th birthday on May the 13th. In 1956, he opened Jerry's Budget Centre on the corner of Jane and Wilson, and eventually Jerry's for Fashion in its current location as 1625 Wilson Avenue in 1973. I want to take this opportunity to recognize Jerry's outstanding and enduring dedication to his business and customers. Jerry still opens the store every morning and greets his customers and continues to serve his community. Extend my warmest wishes to Jerry as he celebrates this milestone. May your birthday be filled with joy and the company of loved ones as you continue to inspire all of us with your vitality, your passion, and your zest for life. Happy birthday, Jerry.
The honourable member from Calgary, Midnapore.
The Minister of Employment has been throwing stones at glass houses for too long. We learned last week that the minister has failed to remove himself from his own PPE company and lobbyist firm, which is a clear conflict of interest. Yep. He remains a director of his PPE company in contravention of the Code of Ethics. The minister's previous lobby firm that he gifted to his friend and colleague successfully lobbied 6 federal departments, including his own department, for millions of dollars in federal grants for the Edmonton International Airport. A man who claims to be focused only on Albertans and Canadians has now shown his true colors. We now know he has only ever been worried about himself. How dare this minister show his face in this House every day, claiming to advocate for Albertans while putting down our premier and taking advantage of the Albertan people. Albertans knew better, and now so do Canadians.
Well said, Stephanie. Well said. She's great.
The
She's
honourable
really
member
good.
for Chicoutimi-Le
Sometimes she goes a little bit off.
Mr.
But
Speaker, after 9 years of this government, young Canadians can no longer make ends meet. The cost of living crisis has made it almost impossible to rent an apartment and pay for groceries. Yesterday, a young Quebec couple was forced to move back in with their parents because it's impossible for them to save up to buy a house while paying for rent. That's how far we've come, Mr. Speaker, with this government spending like crazy. 2 adults with full-time jobs can't even afford their own place. The CMHC even reports that 3 times as many Canadians are putting off buying a home because interest rates are simply too high. While too many young Canadians are giving up on the dream of buying a home, the Bloc, for its part, is making the situation worse by voting with the Liberals for $500 billion in budgetary appropriations. It's precisely this bureaucratic spending that has plunged us into this inflationary crisis. Mr. Speaker, it's expensive to vote Bloc, and Quebecers understand it too. The Liberals and the Bloc are not worth the cost. The honourable member for Longueuil-Charles-Lemoine. Mr. Speaker, it's with great pride that I rise today to highlight the 40th anniversary of Pavillon Marguerite de Champlain, an invaluable resource for abused women and their children on Montreal's South Shore. Over the past 4 decades, more than 10,000 women and children have benefited from the support of this organization.
This chick is wild.
Whether through its shelter services, 24/7 telephone support, individual counseling, group workshops, family intervention, or other services.
She's the one from my clip with Cooper, where she's like telling Cooper to like demand him to like say sorry.
Canada's 2 official language groups and to all cultural communities. To founder and director Deborah Pearson and the entire team of PMC, congratulations on the milestone anniversary, and thank you for the difference that you have made and continue to make in the lives of so many women and children in our community. Merci.
The honourable member from Edmonton-Griesbach.
New Democrats joined thousands around the globe in recognition of International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia, a day to raise awareness of 2S LGBTQI persons' rights and, unfortunately, the continued atrocities facing our community globally. From Stonewall to Edmonton, the queer community has and continues to contribute greatly to a better and more just society. They have shown us the strength of community resilience and remind us of our everlasting pursuit for justice and freedom for all. The trans community has a right to joy, and this joy is under threat by far-right movements that seek to divide with hate, only to pursue power, to tear down the rights of others. Every member of this House has a responsibility to stand up and speak out against the bigotry that is threatening the safety of our fellow citizens. And although it may be politically advantageous to punch down and divide, let me be clear, we aren't going anywhere.
I don't have anything to say about that.
The honourable member for Shefford.
I have no words. Yep.
Once again, the anti-choice circus is in town. The grotesque display of intimidation against women, elected officials, and doctors is back. Every year, they come to remind us of their contempt for women, for women's bodies, for women's rights. And they come every year with the blessing of a bunch of Conservative MPs to whom they give their votes and their money. Let them know, these misogynistic reactionaries, that women's bodies belong to women and only women. Their choice, period.
That's not what Pierre has ever said.
They don't have to justify themselves, they don't have to explain themselves, and they don't have to apologize. Their bodies, period. And no matter how many thousands and thousands of anti-choicers there are, we won't let what's happening in a bunch of American states happen here. They call themselves pro-life when they're really just anti-women. And no matter how proudly they strut their stuff, they're a disgrace to behold.
How can you call another member a disgrace? Come on, Greg.
Order. The honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
The Liberal leadership race, well, it started. Front-runner Mark Carney is first out of the gate. He was recently in front of the Senate, and he pledged to maintain...
I'm sorry. Colleagues, I'm having difficulty hearing the... I am having difficulty hearing the honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South. I'll invite the honourable member to start from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal leadership race, well, it's underway. Front-runner Mark Carney is first out of the gate. He was in the Senate, confirming there and pledging that he would maintain the Prime Minister's punishing carbon tax. When asked about fiscal responsibility, well, there's no policies he's going to change. Mark Carney will continue the Liberal legacy of higher taxes, more spending, and poorer Canadians. Canadians, well, we just don't need another random Liberal making life more expensive. So whether it's carbon tax Carney or the current Prime Minister, Canadians continue to suffer. The more these Liberals spend, the worse things get. In contrast, a common-sense Conservative will axe the tax, build the home, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Let's bring it home!
The honourable member from Pickering-Uxbridge.
Mr. Speaker, when Roe v. Wade was overturned in the United States, Conservative MPs cheered and vowed to do the same here in Canada. We see everyday stories of the life-threatening health implications American women are facing. Last week, the leader of the opposition admitted that he will unilaterally override the charter for policies that Conservatives want. Conservative MPs wasted no time in this House telling women across this country that they believe the decisions of women's health care should be decided by Conservative politicians.
That's not what he has said.
Today, while Conservative MPs are marching on the front lawn to roll back women's rights, we will stand up to fight. We will fight for women to control our own bodies, fight to protect women's charter rights, and we will fight to protect women's freedoms to make our own health care decisions.
They're literally just getting this out of nowhere.
Stand here now and fight with us.
Pierre has never said he's going to rip up the charter and reduce women's rights. He never said that. Never once. I don't know why they run with that.
Order. Colleagues. Oral questions. Questions orales. The honourable member from Regina Capel.
Oh, we're not getting Pierre today.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, Canadians are getting poorer. His inflationary deficits are pushing up inflation and interest rates. That's because when the Prime Minister goes into the markets and borrows billions and billions to fund his spending spree, that bids up the interest rates for everyone else. And a new report from the Bank of Canada is shocking. Average mortgage payments will rise by more than 20% in the next couple of years. Where the heck are Canadian families supposed to come up with an extra few $100s just to pay higher mortgage payments for the homes they already own?
I'm going to ask members just to be very conscious of the language that they use. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
He didn't say anything that's wrong.
Mr. Speaker, given that it is my first opportunity to speak in the House today, I want to speak about a very grave threat to Canadians. Last week, the Conservative leader said he is going to ignore our charter rights.
No, he didn't.
A Conservative MP stood up in this House and said he's opposed to
Why do they keep saying this? He never said that.
Are outside attacking a woman's right to choose. So now we know the truth. They're going to attack our charter rights. They're going to attack the rights of every woman in Canada.
Hear, hear.
This is such misinformation.
Thank you, colleagues. And certainly we all want to hear the member from Regina Capel. I'll ask the member from New Brunswick Southwest, who is a respected member in this House, to please to hold back until he has his voice. The honourable member from Regina Capel.
None of that is true, Mr. Speaker. She's just desperate to distract from her own record. And she's trying to console Canadians by saying that everything's okay because she hasn't quite maxed out the national credit card just yet. But all of that spending and borrowing is having an impact. In fact, Desjardins Financial has concluded that output per capita fell in every province last year, which is the broadest base standard of living decline in Canadian history other than the pandemic, costing Canadian families $4,200 a month. Will somebody over there please cut up the national credit card before more Canadians go bankrupt?
Well said, man. Well said.
Again, I'm going to ask all members to please to be...
How much do you guys want to bet she's going to speak? And she's going to say, Mr. Speaker. And it's really high
another
pitch.
respected member of the House to please only take the floor when she is addressed. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, there was a lot of shouting while I was speaking from the other side of the House. And that is because they are afraid that Canadians are starting to understand their real plan. Canadians have seen they hang out with white supremacists and don't disavow.
Whoa, come on, Greg.
Canadians have seen they are getting ready to tear up the Charter of Rights. And now
Greg, you gotta stop her and make her retract that, man.
A woman's right to choose.
We can't call Trudeau wacko, but she can call the Conservatives white supremacists. Come on, Greg. Come on, get your house in order.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
We'll take no lessons from a government that's trampling over free speech rights by trying to control the internet and control what Canadians can see and post online. But, Mr. Speaker, for random Liberals hoping that when the outgoing Prime Minister finally leaves, a new Liberal leader will rescue them, they're about to be sorely disappointed. Mark Carbon Tax Carney continued his Liberal leadership campaign in the Senate yesterday, where he pushed the same radical agenda, endorsed the current Prime Minister's carbon tax, and couldn't come up with even a penny to cut in wasteful spending. If Mark Carbon Tax Carney won't do it, the current Prime Minister won't do it, will somebody over there axe the tax and fix the budget?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really delighted to hear the Conservative House Leader talk about the rights of Canadians and how important they are. I'm a woman, I'm a mother, and let me tell you what the most fundamental right of every woman and girl in Canada is. The right to control your own body. It is time for the Conservatives to stand up and clearly say, are they going to defend a woman's right to choose? Because what we're hearing from them is they want to end it.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, today at committee, we had great cooperation between the opposition and government. Thanks to the member for Mégantic-L'Érable, the minister understands that July 1st is moving day in Quebec. Thanks to us, the minister now knows that. And I might be smiling, but it's no smiling, no laughing matter, because July 1st is the worst day of the year, especially for those working with those struggling. And this year, people are going to be paying more than ever for rent. And what is the government going to do to help them? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
One day of the year.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased that a member from Quebec is asking that question today. Obviously, I'm not a Quebecer, but I admire the women and feminists of Quebec. Quebecers always understand the importance of the right of each woman in Canada, their right to choice. Do the Quebec Conservatives reaffirm the right of each and every woman in Canada? The honourable member. All women in Quebec and all women in Canada, all men in Canada and all men in Quebec are suffering from this government's inflationary policy. That's what's affecting Canadians. The banks, the mortgages and rents are going to increase because of this government's inflationary spending. Is there anyone from this government who can clearly explain how these $500 billion in spending, the $500 billion in spending, how is that going to reduce inflation? The Right Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm so happy that the member opposite raised the question of Canadians' rights and the rights of Quebecers as well. What affects every woman in Canada and in Quebec is our right to control our own body. This week, a Conservative member here in this place said that he was against that. There are Conservative members on the Hill outside today saying the opposite. What does the member from Quebec have to say about this?
Greg almost fell
over
his own gown.
Coming back to the serious insults from the Liberal member about defending the French language, this morning we were treated to his forced apology to the witnesses he intimidated. Too little, too late. Now that we know exactly what he thinks of Quebecers who are concerned about the decline of French, he has no business being president of the APF, no business traveling the world in princely style to speak on Quebecers' behalf. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and ask him to step down? He no longer has the confidence of Quebecers. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to begin by thanking the bloc members, the member who spoke a few minutes ago about the importance of women's rights in Canada. She was very eloquent, and we support what she said. We understand we agree that there has been a decline of French all across Canada and in Quebec and in the other provinces as well. And that's why our government has been supporting French all across the country.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but every day Chrystia Freeland has handwriting on her hand.
The Prime Minister added insult to injury. He says the Bloc is going after this member because, in his opinion, we don't like Francophones outside Quebec. The fact that we don't take insults lying down to him is an attack on official language minorities. In other words, in his view, Quebecers who refuse to be called extremists and so on are Francophobes. I've got news for him from many Quebecers. You can't walk all over us. The member has no business representing us in the Francophonie. Will the Prime Minister show him the door?
Watch when it goes back to
the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
If we get a good camera angle.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not a Quebecer and I'm not a Francophone, but I do truly want to reassure my colleague opposite that for our government, French all across the country is very important.
There it is.
And we understand that there's been a decline of French in Quebec and all across the country. And that's why our government is supporting Francophones in Quebec and Francophones everywhere else in the country. And that's why we are investing in French in Canada and the world. Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, renters are having a hard time making ends meet. Groceries are expensive. Rents are expensive. People are struggling with credit card debt, and it's affecting their mental health. Meanwhile, the Liberals and the Conservatives are protecting the profits of the grocery CEOs. Why? Maybe it's because they got $150,000 in donations from Loblaws, Metro, and Empire. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And if you don't have $150,000 to attend those parties, oh well, good luck filling your fridge with food. Hey, Liberals, how's the lifestyle of the wealth? How are you liking the lifestyles of the wealth, the rich and famous? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we, like other members in this House, we understand that we have to invest today in order to support Canadians, and that's what we're doing. We also understand that to do this responsibly, fiscally, we need to ask the wealthy to pay their fair share. And that's what we're doing. We understand that we need more competition in the grocery industry, and we're doing that too.
The Honourable Member from Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are taking food off the table and asking themselves why the government isn't lowering food prices. Well, maybe it's because the Liberals and Conservatives have gotten $150,000 from the families and CEOs of Loblaw, Metro, and Empire. Both parties know exactly who pays their bills. Canadians deserve a government that's going to put them before big grocery CEOs. Why are the Liberals favoring CEO profits over lowering costs for Canadians?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government absolutely understands that now is the time to invest in Canada and Canadians, to invest in housing, to invest in affordability, to invest in economic growth. And we know we have to do it in a fiscally responsible way, which is why
we get back to the translator? I liked his voice better.
To pay a little bit more by increasing the capital gains inclusion rate. When it comes to the grocery sector, Mr. Speaker, we know that Canada needs more competition, and that's why we've brought in a once-in-a-generation change to Canada's competition law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, Canada has turned into a nation of renters. After spending $89 billion on a photo op slush fund for housing, rents and mortgages doubled. The dream of home ownership for an entire generation is dead. Canadians are stretched because of higher taxes and higher rent, like the carbon tax scam that increased, making it harder for Canadians to pay for rent and food. Was it fair to increase the carbon tax scam 23% when 70% of Canadians told them not to?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, if my honourable colleague is concerned about tax increases, I suggest he talk to the leader of his own party who's proposing to increase taxes on new apartment construction by putting the GST back on apartment rentals in this country. Mr. Speaker, their plan is to raise taxes on home construction. Their plan is to cut funding for the communities that are going to build homes. He has actively promised in the media that he views the role of the government not to participate in housing. On our side of the House, we're going to make the investments necessary to solve the housing crisis. I hope the Conservatives will join us.
It's funny because I thought Trudeau said it's not his problem to get involved in housing.
We won't take any lessons from the worst immigration and housing minister in Canadian history. And now we have Mark Carbon Tax Carney preaching the same radical agenda in his Liberal leadership like this Prime Minister. He won't denounce the Liberal carbon tax and commit to cutting 1 penny of Liberal waste. Whether it's Carney or this Prime Minister, the inflation-driving deficits will continue. And just like the carbon tax scam, none of them are worth the cost. Will any other Liberal leadership candidate stand up today, show some common sense, and declare they'll finally axe the tax?
No, they're in love with this tax. They're like married to it.
Speaker, it's understandable why Conservatives want to throw up some smoke screens. It's been a very bad couple of weeks to be a Conservative in this country. First of all, they cavort with white extremists. Then their leader says we're going to have an a la carte Charter of Rights where we're going to take away your rights on a whim. And now, Mr. Speaker, we have a female candidate for a Conservative nomination alleging criminal content in the conduct of her nomination, identity fraud, false information. When will they stand up for law and order, Mr. Speaker?
What kind of news is he reading off his phone there?
Mr. Speaker, this NDP Liberal government has made life even more unaffordable for Canadians by raising the wacko carbon tax by 23%. Gas, groceries, and everything else is more and more.
It's actually one of the rare times that I can't hear the own a colleague from York Simcoe. If I could please ask members not to raise their voices while the honourable member from York Simcoe or any other member who has the floor to interrupt the member. So I'm going to ask the honourable member from York Simcoe to start from the top.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This NDP Liberal government has made life even more unaffordable for Canadians by raising the wacko carbon tax by 23%. Gas, groceries, and everything else is making life more and more expensive, especially for those living in rural and small-town communities where driving further for longer is just a fact of life. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed Canadians would be better off without the carbon tax. Will the Prime Minister stand today and admit to Canadians that he's just not worth the cost?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It causes me some disappointment to see an honourable colleague with whom I actually get along very well spouting such misinformation in the House. At the end of the day, the price on pollution is an effective way to fight climate change, but it is also a way to actually help with affordability.
You're not meeting any of your climate change targets.
Says it. 300 economists across the country say it. It is a way in which to fight climate change, but also to make life more affordable for Canadians. It is good climate policy. It is good economic policy for Canada.
The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Well, we know that is disinformation, Mr. Speaker. Canadians looking at their bank account know that the carbon tax hurts. After all, this government continues to classify small town and rural communities as urban, making them ineligible for the rural rebate and forcing them to pay more in carbon taxes to this out-of-touch Prime Minister. So, are they punishing rural Canadians and dividing them based on geography? Or does the Liberals actually think that Pefferlaw is downtown Toronto?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage
I know we all love York Simcoe and all the communities they're in.
What is he going on about today, man?
I will ask members to please hold their voices and so we can listen to the answer from the Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Energy from the top.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage my honourable colleague to actually read Bill C-59, which doubles the rural top-up. I would encourage him to actually read the letter from 300 economists across the country that actually say that people, 8 out of 10 Canadians, get more money back. Rather than simply axing the facts, he should do his homework. There you go.
L'honorable député de Charlebourg.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, since 2015, the public service has grown by 110,000 public servants. And despite this, a lot of money is going to external consultants. Doesn't make sense. A vote on the budget isn't about more public servants. That comes through appropriations. And the Bloc voted for $500 billion in budget appropriations. Will the Prime Minister stop using consultants and instead rely on the expertise of his many public servants? The Honourable Minister, I'd like to thank the member for his question. I think everyone here can thank the excellent work of public servants. They're among the best in the world. And you've seen not only that in the last budget, we drew up a plan for growth and investment in families, a plan for investing in the future of this country, but the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister also presented a plan for spending. We will always be very strict and serious with public spending, and we will always thank those who work in our public service. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, that was exactly what my question was all about. We have 110,000 new public servants hired, but they're still paying tons of consultants, millions of dollars. So the question is simple. Can we stop paying $21 million a year for consultants and instead use these new public servants or not? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives never miss an opportunity to obfuscate, to threaten, and even to propose vicious cuts to our public service. Clearly, the government is taking care of business. We're helping seniors. We're helping out with childcare, with dental care, with school food programs. It takes people to administer that. And those are the same people the Conservatives are proposing to ravage, lay off, and cut. I would invite the member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier to wait his turn. The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, we're not the only ones worried about a merger between CBC and Radio-Canada. Yesterday, the National Assembly voted unanimously in favour of a motion calling on the public broadcaster to protect the independence of French language services and to consolidate that. Consolidate the independence, not bring CBC and Radio-Canada closer together. Talking about bringing them closer
I like that idea,
together
Prophet.
like Catherine
Also,
Tate is doing.
Canada
is really
has
about
like
subjecting Radio-Canada
something like
to the
30%
CBC's vision,
of the
and that
entire
won't
world's
work.
forest,
It even
like
led to
trees.
the resignation of Michel
we have
Bissonnette.
so much
How does
trees
the
in
minister
Canada?
intend to protect
It's like
Radio-Canada's
30%
independence
of the entire
from
world,
the CBC?
and we pollute
the Honourable
like
Minister.
1.5%
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank
of the
my colleague for
entire
his question.
global emissions.
In order to
It's like
protect
Canada's like
Radio-Canada
1.5%.
and the CBC, the only way to do that is to support the CBC and Radio-Canada. That's what we're going to do on this side, whereas on the other side, the Conservatives just want to cut CBC. My question for the Bloc is, will the Bloc stand with us in supporting CBC and Radio-Canada, or are they going to align with the Conservatives? The Honourable Member for Shampoo. I don't think there's any intelligent person who thinks the Bloc stands with the Conservatives on this file. The CBC CEO made it very clear in her committee appearance, if the Conservatives cut the CBC, it'll cause major harm to Francophone communities and even to Radio-Canada in Quebec. She confirmed that the two are connected. Obviously, we don't want cuts to the CBC. The Bloc is in favor of a strong public broadcaster. That's not up for debate. But the minister has to present her modernization plan. Will she include a watertight barrier to prevent Radio-Canada from falling victim to potential cuts at CBC? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
It raises an important point. Having a strong public broadcaster in this country is what this side of the House is going to do, what our government has done and will continue to do. The minister is working actively on ensuring that there is a plan forward for the CBC. But what is really important, Mr. Speaker, is that this side of the House, we believe in a CBC, in a Radio-Canada that is independent, that is powerful, that gives Canadians from coast to coast to coast a voice, not what the Conservatives want to do, which is simply say they will gut it or worst, shut it.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. On the one hand, the CBC CEO, Catherine Tate, assures us that programming and management will not be affected by a merger between CBC and Radio-Canada. But on the other hand, we understand that everything's already been brought together except programming and management. Her plan for rapprochement is to harmonize sectors and find solutions together. Well, finding solutions together just doesn't work. That would mean CBC management imposing its vision on Radio-Canada. Why is the minister refusing to protect Radio-Canada's independence from CBC's English-speaking management? The Honourable Minister of Employment. Mr. Speaker,
here's the scandalous.
It is critical to have a public broadcaster here in Canada to promote French from coast to coast, promote minority communities like in Edmonton, Peace River, Newfoundland and Labrador, and so on. French is important to Canadians, and the public broadcaster is there to promote that and to allow us to communicate from coast to coast in French.
The Honourable Member from Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
After 9 years, Northern Canadians are going hungry, and it's getting worse because of the carbon tax. In 2018, 57% of Nunavut families lived with food insecurity versus the national average of 12.7%. That number now is a whopping 69% and is amongst the worst in the developed world. Almost 70% of Nunavummiut are going hungry every single day. This PM knows the carbon tax is making Northerners go hungry. Why doesn't he just axe the carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister for Northern Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite has a lot of nerve. For the last 8 years, he and his government have voted against every initiative to help middle-class families. When we brought in $10 a day daycare, he voted against it. When we brought in dental care for kids, which had served 55,000 children in his province, he voted against it. When we introduced the Canada Child Benefit, he voted against it. He and his team should be embarrassed.
Here, here.
What is that tie? It's got like
Member from Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
If it takes nerve to stand up for the people of Nunavut, I'll do that every single day.
That's what I'm talking about. That's a good comeback right there.
It's getting worse on your watch, Minister, in Nunavut, and you know it, not better. I visited a grocery store in Iqaluit a few weeks ago. A can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup is over $6. A small can of tuna is over $8. Macintosh apples are $3 each, and a liter bottle of ketchup is over $13. The people of Nunavut are going hungry while this minister hikes his carbon tax. Why won't he simply axe the tax?
Here, here.
The Minister for Northern Development.
Here goes
Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago in Nunavut, I announced $143 million of new funding for Nutrition North. He voted against it. The Conservatives on the other side voted against it. In this budget, we have $23 million for Nutrition North, $101 million for the Harvester Support Grant, Community Foods Programs. Mr. Speaker, I want to know if they're going to vote against it or they're going to support it.
I don't know.
The Honourable Member from Cypress Hills, Grassland.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, over 2 million Canadians are using a food bank every single month. The CEO of Food Banks Canada says that food banks are becoming unsustainable as more food banks are closing their doors because they are out of food. Yet the Prime Minister is determined as ever to drive up the cost of food as he refuses to listen to the millions of Canadians who want to axe his extreme tax. If he won't listen to us, why won't he at least listen to Food Banks Canada's CEO or maybe the millions of Canadians who are demanding that he lower the price of food by axing his extreme carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Thank you. I am very proud to be part of a government that believes that every child should have access to food while at school, and that's why we announced our National School Food Program, ensuring that an additional 400,000 kids have access to food while at school. I don't understand why the Conservatives would oppose such a measure. How would this be controversial, Mr. Speaker, getting food into children's bellies? Children deserve to learn on a full stomach, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, reproductive rights are under attack, including by Conservatives who voted against free contraceptives, have pushed backdoor legislation, and tabled petitions attempting to violate abortion rights. But the Liberals are no better, Mr. Speaker. They failed to uphold access to abortion care, including in New Brunswick, where there is not a single abortion clinic. When will the government enforce the Canada Health Act and protect the right to access a safe abortion?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to my friend from across the way. I agree we need to protect abortion rights in this country, and I saw her this morning with the people on Parliament Hill who are fighting for choice, who are fighting against the people who are there to take our rights away.
Okay, I'm gonna look
there's
that
more
up right
to
after
do.
this.
It's not perfect yet. We will get there. On this side of the
See
house,
how many
we are
people are there
committed
and
to
what
it.
they're saying.
The honourable member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
If you have to negotiate for dignity, dignity is lost. That is what we heard today at Canada's first ever Air Accessibility Summit. Forcing people to drag themselves off of planes or to be taken out on food carts is what's happening under the Liberals.
Summit.
Today, the minister said he could intervene, but he prefers to leave it up to big CEOs, or as he called it, the guys.
Air
That
accessibility.
hasn't worked for the last 20 years. Why won't the Liberal minister make sure people with disabilities are treated with dignity?
People can't even afford food on the ground, let alone in the air.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, this morning my colleague and I were at the summit that we convened, and we had people living with disabilities that had better experience representing other people that were there for a frank and open discussions. And we also asked the airline companies, the airports, CATSA, CBC, all of them. Why? Because we have to find solutions, Mr. Speaker. What we've missed in the past cannot happen anymore. We need concrete solutions. That's what we're working on. The Conservatives, they just closed their eyes. They did nothing in the past. We will do better, much better, all of us together.
The honourable member from Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, women's reproductive rights across the world are under assault, and we're seeing the same rhetoric and tactics used by anti-choice advocates in the United States leaking into Canada and into this Parliament. Can the Deputy Prime Minister speak to the women, the girls, and all who care about them in this country, and assure them that their federal government and assure them what their federal government is doing to stand up for their bodies and for their rights?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
I'd like to thank my colleague for the really important question. Last week, the Conservative leader bragged that he believes in an a la carte charter of rights. And this week, the Conservatives revealed which is the first right they want to abolish. First, a Conservative MP stood up in this House and said he wants to abolish a woman's right to choose. And then today, Conservative MPs are standing outside saying the same thing. The hard right in the U.S. has abolished a woman's right to choose in many states. We will not let them do that in Canada.
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs and disorder. BC families have suffered under the Liberals' wacko legalization of deadly hard drugs like crack, cocaine, heroin and meth. This wacko hard drug experiment should be ended, not expanded to Toronto or Montreal or anywhere else. Conservatives have a motion to end the legalization of deadly hard drugs, ensure the government denies any active or or further applications and redirect money to treatment and recovery? Will the minister support the Conservative motion to end this government's radical failed drug policy experiment?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
I think we need to take a moment to recognize why this issue is so important for every family that has lost a loved one to this tragic overdose crisis from an illegal toxic drug supply. People are dying alone from fentanyl, Mr. Speaker. We need policies that work. We need to meet communities where they are, and we need to understand that this is public health, Mr. Speaker. They continue to want to criminalize family members rather than getting them harm reduction, prevention, and treatment. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to saving lives and getting people health care.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, according to the most recent data, since the NDP Liberal Prime Minister took office 9 years ago, sadly, opioid overdose deaths across Canada increased 166%. And in BC, overdose deaths are now the leading cause of death for youth aged 10 to 18. Addiction doctors came out saying legalized drugs are being diverted to youth. And unbelievably today, the Minister for Children refused to answer if she's standing up for children against her government's wacko drug policies. Conservatives are calling to end taxpayer-funded narcotics, which are being diverted to our children. Will the Minister for Children stand up for children and vote for our Conservative motion?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, the member across the way seems to not want to recognize that in provinces like Alberta, where they cut back on a comprehensive continuum of care, including harm reduction, people are dying at astronomical rates. Diversion is illegal, Mr. Speaker. The member well knows
just admitted
that.
it, though.
We are committed to a full continuum of care to help those who need health care, not criminalize them, not force them into treatment, but get them the help that they need. Shame.
The Honourable Member from Oxford.
After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. Thanks to his wacko drug policies that have legalized hard drugs like crack, meth, and heroin, we are now seeing 22 Canadians die every single day from drug overdose. And this Prime Minister has even legalized open drug use in our parks, in our playgrounds, and in our schools. Will this Prime Minister show some compassion, support our motion to ban hard drugs, and support treatment so we can bring our loved ones home drug-free?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, it is amazing to me that across the way they continue to mislead Canadians. Addressing the overdose crisis and the tragic deaths that we are seeing from illegal fentanyl in our streets needs harm reduction, needs prevention, it needs treatment and law enforcement, Mr. Speaker. We work collaboratively with every jurisdiction to provide health care. Why do they continue to think it's okay to criminalize loved ones who need help?
The Honourable Member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister's wacko policies, overdoses have increased 166%. Wow. And the #1 cause of death for kids in BC is opioids. The Vancouver Police told Parliament the Liberals' safe supply is ending up on the black market, which is then sold to children, creating a new generation of addicts. The Minister of Children said earlier today that kids dying of opioids is not her problem. So whose problem is it? And who is going to protect the children and end the legalization of fentanyl, meth, and crack?
Well,
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, it's all of our grief. That's what it is. It's every single parent in this country who has lost a child. That's what it's about, Mr. Speaker. It's about the person who's on the street today hoping they're going to make it to tomorrow, and that their parents far away from them are also hoping, Mr. Speaker, that they'll make it to tomorrow. That's why we work with scientists and doctors, Mr. Speaker, because we are focused on saving lives, even the people they don't think are worth saving.
Whoa, calm down. Holy crap.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. There's no worker shortage in the public service, Mr. Speaker. Its ranks have swelled by 109,000 since the Liberals came to power. That's an increase of 42%, and yet more and more consultants are being hired too. More employees, more consultants, but certainly not more services. You still can't get a passport or get your immigration file processed. The only thing that's increasing is the government's interference in Quebec's areas of jurisdiction. Instead of spending taxpayers' money and interfering in Quebec, can the government just do its job and make sure the public service does its too?
During the honourable member's question, there was a conversation between both sides of the House. I'm going to invite members, if they do want to have a conversation, there are many tools which you can use, especially the young pages here, if you want to pass a note. But please, do not speak over it, because it is difficult for people to hear the question, and it was an important question that needed to be asked. L'honorable leader du gouvernement.
The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we stand up for a strong public service, and we believe in the mission of a strong government. So it provides services to Canadians to ensure that we have programs to help our seniors, to help our children, to supervise approvals of pharmaceuticals. So the Conservatives want to axe the public service, and the Bloc Québécois doesn't believe in the federal state. So we're the only choice. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean.
Encore une fois.
Once again. I would urge the member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis to take the discussion outside, please. I would urge you not to hold discussions here in the chamber while questions are being put. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Immigration is meeting his counterparts tomorrow, and there are many demands. Quebec is calling for a redistribution of asylum seekers, a decrease in temporary immigration and the approval of candidates by Quebec, French language training for federal programs, and $1 billion to cover Quebec's integration costs of asylum seekers. And if Quebec doesn't get any answers to its demands, it has promised a referendum. Will tomorrow the minister give answers to these demands, or will he be voting no in the upcoming Quebec referendum, immigration referendum? The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're going to realize quickly that you're
my
a very
colleague
small
is
country.
a fine person, but he is not invited to my meeting tomorrow. Obviously, we will be working with our provincial and territorial partners to act responsibly for temporary workers and asylum seekers. So he'll have to hold his breath a little bit longer. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 9 years of this Prime Minister's, Quebec is headed for the worst moving day crisis in its history. This PM's inflationary spending has doubled rent costs and forced citizens, like the lady we heard about in the papers, to live in their minivans. In Quebec, everyone knows that July 1st is going to be catastrophic, but the minister confirmed this morning that he knows nothing about this. Can the Prime Minister tell us how many Quebecers are going to be living in the streets on July 1st because of his minister's ignorance? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
He's going to go 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
My colleague
is talking about the Minister of Housing, and he's wondering about how many.
That's all he ever says.
We know that the Conservative leader was the housing minister in a former government and created 6 housing units. This is well known. 6 affordable housing units that the former Minister of Housing created, compared to 8,000 that have been created in Quebec City. Unfortunately, the Conservative leader is calling Quebecers incompetent. The Honourable Member. How many houses has the Housing Minister's Housing Accelerator Fund built in Quebec for Quebecers on July 1st? 0. 0. 0. July 1st is coming up, And after 9 years of this Prime Minister's failures, after billions of budget money that was voted for by the Bloc, the Minister cannot tell Quebecers how many houses are going to be ready for July 1st. The crisis is serious. People are considering suicide because they have no homes. Will the Prime Minister finally admit that he has failed and finally build houses instead of building bureaucracy in order to house Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
He's going to go
Mr. Speaker, my colleague puts an excellent question. How many houses that were built by the $1.8 billion that the Canadian government has created? 8,000, Mr. Speaker. We are very pleased to say so publicly. Unfortunately, that's a pretty bad comparison given the 6 affordable housing units that were created by the former Prime Minister of Housing, currently the Conservative leader, and that's across the whole country.
All he keeps doing is 6.
The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Bloc Liberal government,
3 months.
Yes, Bloc Liberal, because the Bloc voted for $500 billion of budget money to be used on inflationary spending that has increased the price of everything. Housing, interest rates, groceries, everything is more expensive, even voting for the Bloc. When will this Prime Minister stop his wasteful spending so that Quebecers can finally live in houses instead of living in their vehicles? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, the people who are watching us at home must have had burning ears because now we're talking about Bloc Liberals. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? On this side of the House, we know that we can't build houses with slogans. You can't grow an economy with bad advertising, as we see on the other side. We can't build the future by asking questions. We build a country by investing, and that is what we did by investing in families, by investing in housing, by investing in economic growth. Mr. Speaker, Canada is a 21st century country. We should be proud of that. The Honourable Member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, our sisters across the border no longer have safe access to abortion. And that thing could come here. Simone de Beauvoir said...
Why are we talking about something that's in the States?
Whether it be a political or economic crisis, why does it take these crises to bring forward the rights of women? Because we are never sure what is going to happen. So can the honourable member guarantee that the Liberals will always protect women's rights and freedoms? The Honourable Minister. Throughout the world, Canada is synonym of promises and freedom. When I returned to Chile, I realized that you have no rights if you're pregnant. For the second time, Canada saved me by allowing me to have a legal and safe abortion for a future that I had chosen. At that time and today, for me, as for so many women, this Canadian freedom becomes so meaningful. Why are the Conservatives attacking the freedom for women to choose?
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The Liberal Employment Minister is the latest Liberal caught in an ethical scandal. He was secretly working the back door and being paid for lobbying his own government through numbered companies. Now, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, the Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost or the corruption of his employment minister. He tried to mislead Canadians when he appeared at committee before about how much he was paid for his secret lobbying, but he's being hauled before committee again and is going to have to tell the truth. How much was the minister paid?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the minister has already addressed all of those allegations, including the ones that member would never repeat outside this House of Commons. But this bad couple of weeks for the Conservative Party, no surprise, they want to distract. You know, Diagolon, white extremists, now the right to choose being put on the table, Mr. Speaker.
The owner of Diagolon said himself he has no bearing. He does not support Pierre. He doesn't support a Conservative Party. They don't support anything.
Very, very bad couple of weeks, Mr. Speaker.
I don't know why they keep dropping that. And then this whole thing with the abortion. Pierre has never said he's going to rip up human rights for women. He's never said that.
Speaker,
not
these
once.
Liberals would beg for a week like this Conservative Party just had. They can look at fundraising numbers, they can look at polling numbers, and of course they can look at newspapers and see that another one of their ministers is caught in an ethical scandal. Like this Prime Minister who got caught breaking the law. Like this Public Safety Minister who got caught breaking the law and then tried to appoint his sister-in-law to be the Ethics Commissioner. These Liberals can't seem to help themselves. The Employment Minister was illegally lobbying, cashing checks while he put $110 million of taxpayer money out the door. Will they support an RCMP investigation?
I'm going to ask honourable members, please, to hold back on their statements until we can have an answer. The Honourable Government House Leader.
The Campaign Life Coalition publishes a list of Conservative MPs who they deem anti-choice, anti-LGBT enough to endorse in the election. Well, guess what? The member from Leeds Grenville has a green light, Mr. Speaker.
That's right.
And that makes him one of 80 Conservative MPs who
What is this site? What did he call
choose
it?
in this country, who would chop up the
What is this rating thing? He's got a green light of what?
The leader of the opposition, Mr. Speaker, get up, turn around, and say we're not putting abortion rights back on the table in this House.
What is this site? What are we conferring about now? What's the issue? Is it because it's because the prop he was holding up? The paper? Or no? Or why are we taking so long to confer about this?
The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
A dangerous sexual offender was in medium security. He needed hospitalization, so he should have been escorted under guard. But authorities didn't want to pay for him to be guarded. According to the Toronto Sun, his security was changed from medium to minimum security, and he received permission to be temporarily absent from jail. This person is reportedly under court order not to be in the presence of children on release. Why was a sexual offender left unsupervised at a hospital, and they seem to think it's funny? Why won't they answer this?
Wow. Things are turning up 8 now.
Colleagues. Colleagues. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend doesn't serve to reassure Canadians when he exaggerates and distorts a series of elements that he knows, Mr. Speaker, are misleading. What he does know is we have a rigorous correctional service system where offenders are placed in the appropriate, secure federal penitentiaries based on an assessment done by professional public servants. The most important criteria is, of course, the safety of the public. We will always support public safety by ensuring that dangerous offenders are kept in the appropriate, secure federal prisons.
But they're not.
The Honourable Member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, around the world we are seeing the rights of women and girls, including sexual and reproductive health, being rolled back or denied. Canadians are proud of our rights and freedoms, where women have control over their own futures, over their own body. It is their human right. At the same time, we also know that we cannot take this for granted, especially when the rise of anti-abortion rhetoric and threatening promises by the Conservatives. Can the Minister of Foreign Affairs reaffirm our government's commitment to Canada's leadership both at home and abroad when it comes to advancing?
The honourable member has gone over time. We're going to get back to this at the end of question period, but all members will understand, of course, that sometimes when the speaker is in conversation with honourable members, it's difficult to do several things at the same time. The honourable minister
Why is he so laughable
rising on her feet.
He's laughing at everything.
Mr. Speaker, to all women in this House, to all women in this country, to all women in the world, this government will forever be there to support your right to choose. Exactly. No government, no politician, no judge, no one should take that right away from you. Make no mistake, the Conservative leader and his members are trying to politicize women's bodies, and they're willing also to make sure that they control women. And this is to satisfy their far-right base. On this side of the House, we will always be there to support women and women's right to choose.
Turn up your thing. Oh, it's funny.
The honourable member from Timmins, James Bay.
So the latest reports show that emissions from big oil and gas are up yet again. Quelle surprise. And now Imperial Oil is announcing a massive increase in production thanks to this government's $34 billion freebie known as the TMX pipeline. So that'll be 900,000 barrels a day of unrefined bitumen emissions threatening the coastal Indigenous communities. But the government's going to go one step further and exclude greenhouse gas emissions from environmental assessments. So will the Environment Minister just admit that his promise at COP26 for an emissions cap was just a publicity stunt?
That's right.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable colleague for his question. I would remind him that just last week the National Inventory Report came out, and it shows that since before pandemic, our emissions have gone down 44 million tonnes, Mr. Speaker. So the largest decrease in the last 25 years. It's the equivalent of removing from our road 13 million gas-powered vehicles. Our plan is working, but I'll agree with him. There's more we need to do to fight climate change in this country. If only the Conservative Party of Canada
Look at his pits.
could understand that.
He is sweating. Look at his armpits. He's soaked.
The honourable member
That's
from
nasty.
Spadina, Fort York.
Did anybody else
Mr.
notice
Speaker,
that?
protesters against Israel and the war with Hamas have set up an illegal encampment at the University of Toronto. Most of these demonstrators for hire are not even U of T students. Mr. Speaker, hate propaganda, threats, and anti-Semitic slogans are being directed at legitimate students. Media state that the encampment is funded by pro-Hamas sympathizers who are directing a sham protest for a listed terrorist organization. Mr. Speaker, is the government investigating pro-Hamas entities in Canada who are funneling money to support anti-Semitism and illegal protests in Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the local authorities are engaged in their jurisdictions on this matter. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will always protect the Charter-guaranteed right to freedom of speech and expression, but it must not cross the line into hate and intimidation. Mr. Speaker, at times like this, as a government, we're going to continue to do everything that we can to combat hate and to bring people together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So
Yeah, that was gross. I like how all you guys saw that disgusting growth.
There are a number of points of order which have been raised, but there is also the Thursday question. I know that government leaders have, House leaders rather, have business to conduct. The Honourable will go to the Honourable Opposition House Leader for the Thursday question, and then we will take on a number of points of order that have been raised.
Thank you very much,
All
Mr.
right,
Speaker.
well, that's
and it
it
being
for today,
Thursday,
then.
I'd like to know if the Government House Leader can update the House as to what we will be dealing with for the rest of this week and for the week after the constituency work week, which is scheduled for the week of the 20th. And I wonder if you can inform the House on a couple of very important items. This House passed a motion ordering the Prime Minister to host a carbon tax conference within a certain time period after the motion was adopted. The government has about a week left. So can the government House Leader inform Canadians as to what day the Prime Minister will hold this carbon tax conference with the premiers, what channel we can watch it on, and whether or not he will listen to the 70% of Canadians and 7 out of 10 provincial premiers who want to axe the tax. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Good question.
The Honourable Government House Leader. Well, Mr. Speaker, I know the government's approaching that issue with all the seriousness with which the Conservatives come up with their slogans. But moving on to the House agenda, this evening we will resume debate on Bill C-59, the Fall Economic Statement Implementation Act 2023. Tomorrow morning we will call Government Business Motion number 39 concerning the pharmacare legislation. We will go back to debate on Bill C-59 in the afternoon. Upon our return following the constituency week, we will resume debate on Bill C-69, the Budget Implementation Act. I would also like to inform the House that Thursday, May 23rd, shall be an allotted day. En ce qui concerne l'extension des
Concerning extended sitting hours, I would like to request that the daily adjournment time for our next sitting be midnight pursuant to the order adopted
you guys want to go till
Wednesday,
midnight.
February 28th, 2024, and pursuant to Section 81.4 of the Standing Order. I would like Thursday, May 23rd to be for the study of the budget and the Department of Justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right.
Pursuant
Well,
to
that's
the
it for
order
today.
from
Like I said, guys, we'll be back on
Wednesday,
tomorrow,
February
2 p.m.
28th.
There's already lots of good
The
clips on the
sitting
channel
will
from some
be,
committees and stuff, but I've got a
extended.
couple more coming out in an hour and then another hour. So,
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yep. All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Madam Speaker, I rise to add to the question of privilege that I